At exactly 3:15 a.m., deep within Russian territory, the silence of night is broken by a distant hum. It grows louder until the air trembles. A formation of 34 Ukrainian drones slices through the fog, racing toward their target at nearly 300 miles per hour. In less than a minute, they will reach the beating heart of Russia's aerial power, its largest Shahid drone manufacturing facility, a site responsible for producing dozens of attack drones every day. For weeks, Moscow had hailed the Veluki complex as proof of its industrial strength. State media called it untouchable, protected by a fortress wall of defenses. Around it stood layers of radar and missile batteries, Nebo-M early warning systems, Panzer, S-1 air defenses, and electronic warfare jammers, all integrated into a single network. Russian commanders were so confident that, according to intercepted communications, they even hosted barbecues outside the factory gates to celebrate record output. But what they didn't know was that, for 3 months, Ukrainian intelligence had been quietly watching them. Every movement, every shift rotation, every radar sweep. Analysts reviewed more than 2,000 hours of satellite and drone footage, searching for the smallest flaw. And eventually they found one. The weakness wasn't the technology, it was in the people. A junior night shift crew responsible for manning one of the Panzer batteries had developed a dangerous habit. Whenever small, low-altitude radar signatures appeared on their screens, they dismissed them as flocks of migrating birds. It happened often enough to become routine, and routine in war is a seed of disaster. The plan that emerged was bold, bordering on reckless. Wait for a night so foggy that even the moon would vanish. Then fly low, so low the drones would skim the treetops, and use that same fog to blend in with the very flocks the Russians had learned to ignore. The objective was monumental. Cripple 70% of Russia's Shahid drone production, and by doing so, blind their aerial reconnaissance and disrupt their battlefield coordination for months. But failure would mean losing a $2 million drone swarm, a devastating propaganda win for Moscow, and a major setback for Ukraine's drone corps. Just as preparations were finalized, a chilling intelligence update arrived. Russian forces had recently reinforced the Veluki site with Mobile 96 L6E radar system, a far more advanced platform, and this one was operated by a veteran radar crew with direct orders to engage anything airborne. The only known weakness in the fortress had just been sealed shut. Still, the mission couldn't be canceled. Every hour that factory continued operating meant more Shahids over Ukrainian skies. The planners knew the odds but accepted the risk. There would be no second chance. At 3:17 a.m., 60 miles from the border, inside a cramped mobile command vehicle, a small group of Ukrainian operators initiated the strike. The interior was dimly lit, the only light coming from the cold blue glow of their FPV control screens. Each operator's face reflected the same tension: steady hands, locked eyes, calm focus. Through encrypted comms came the order: swarm is live. Execute launch sequence. 34 Ram, 2X drones rose into the sky like silent phantoms, their engines humming softly as they immediately dropped to 100 feet above the ground, disappearing into the heavy Belgorod fog. But these drones weren't heading straight to the factory. They were part of a carefully choreographed deception. Moments before, 10 British-built Banshee Jet 80-plus drones had launched on a separate vector, climbing high, broadcasting a radar signature identical to a formation of Soviet-era Su-27 fighter jets. Their purpose was simple: make the enemy look up while the real threat crept in from below. This complex ballet of deception was directed by an AI control system known as Night Owl, a custom algorithm designed for real-time coordination. It processed data from an RQ-20 Puma reconnaissance drone orbiting invisibly 15,000 feet above the battlefield. Night Owl adjusted flight paths, accounted for 15-mile-per-hour crosswinds, and synchronized every movement in the sky. Despite the technology, human instinct remained critical. The operators weren't just observers. They were pilots, ready to seize manual control the instant the situation shifted. One voice cut through the radio chatter. Angle 15. Watch the radar bloom. The operation was underway. The swarm now had 7 minutes to cross the kill zone before Russian defenses identified the true targets. At 3:19 a.m., the bait worked. Inside the Russian command bunker, the veteran officer monitoring his main display saw 10 massive signatures barreling toward the factory, exactly what the Ukrainians wanted him to see. Without hesitation, he barked orders through his headset. Engage all primary targets. Fire at will. The Panzer S-1 system came alive in a roar of machinery and fire. Within seconds, missiles streaked into the sky, obliterating several of the Banshee decoys in a shower of light. On screen, the Russian radar feed showed clear success. Inbound targets were vanishing one after another. The crew believed they were repelling a major air raid with textbook precision, but it was all part of the performance. Inside the Ukrainian command van, the operators watched the icons for their decoy drones blink out one by one. It wasn't a loss. It was progress. Every destroyed decoy meant another few seconds of confusion. In that chaos, the main swarm, the real strike team, advanced unseen. The first phase had gone perfectly. Yet everyone in the van knew the next few minutes would decide everything. Once the Russians realized the deception, the true swarm would be exposed to the most dangerous air defense network on the continent. At that moment, tension turned into quiet precision. Every breath, every movement was measured. The mission had entered its second stage. At 3:21 a.m., the illusion began to crumble. Inside the Russian command bunker, the veteran officer's confidence turned to suspicion. The radar screen that had once looked so clear now seemed too clean. The fighter jets his men had proudly destroyed left no secondary debris signatures. No radar scatter, no heat trails, nothing. He had seen this trick before. He knew he had been deceived. Fury replaced triumph. He slammed his fist on the console and ordered his team to sweep all bands, all altitudes. The searchlights of the Russian defense grid flickered through the fog, sweeping across the sky like hunting beams. The element of surprise, Ukraine's greatest weapon, was now gone. The main swarm of RAM. 2X drones had less than 5 minutes to reach the target before the veteran crew locked onto them. Inside the Ukrainian mobile command unit, tension hung thick. One operator muttered, "They're scanning. They know something's out there." And yet Night Owl, the AI brain guiding the mission, had already predicted this outcome. It shifted the entire operation into a new mode, Phantom Echo. Instead of hiding the drones, it would make them blend in. The swarm instantly fragmented into 3 separate formations, each weaving erratically like a flock of large birds. The software used real biological flight data gathered from the Belgrade forests, copying the uneven rhythm of migrating geese. On the Russian radar screens, the hard, geometric returns of hostile aircraft suddenly softened. What had once looked like incoming missiles now appeared as harmless biological echoes. Down in the control room, a junior radar operator hesitated. His superior was shouting commands, but his training told him those returns were non-threatening. He dismissed the blips as false positives, migrating wildlife disturbed by the attack. Meanwhile, 15,000 feet above, the RQ-20 Puma reconnaissance drone deployed its secret weapon, a specialized infrared decoy. Its purpose wasn't a trick radar. It was to blind the enemy's optical targeting cameras. The flare ignited, scattering brilliant IR light through the fog. On Russian surveillance screens, the night vision feeds exploded in white static. The fog that had once been Russia's shield had now become its enemy. Inside a Ukrainian van, an operator shouted, "They're blind! Push through the gap!" They had found a 15-second window, a weakness discovered months earlier during surveillance. A brief lapse during the 3:10 a.m. shift change at the Panzer consoles. The drone surged forward. For a few moments, everything worked exactly as planned. The radar returns faded. The Russian consoles displayed a clear sky. The operators believed the threat was over. But the veteran commander was no longer trusting his main screen. He turned his attention to a separate terminal, the new 96L6E radar system, a powerful mobile array designed to detect the faintest signals. What he saw chilled him. Hidden among the bird-like echoes, a few shapes were moving too deliberately, too precisely. He zoomed in and drew a manual targeting box around them. In that moment, he saw through the deception. "They're not birds," he growled. "Hostile confirmed. Fire on my mark." At 3:22 a.m., for SA, 22 missiles launched in a single, deafening burst. Each rocket accelerated over 4,000 feet per second, leaving blazing trails that cut across the fog-shrouded sky. Inside the Ukrainian command van, alarm screamed. The operators watched in horror as their monitors flashed red. Incoming. 4. The Night Owl AI immediately calculated evasive maneuvers, attempting to scatter the drones. But fate intervened in the form of nature itself. Without warning, a violent 25-mile-per-hour wind shear tore across the region, slamming into formation like a hammer. On screen, the horizon tilted violently. Operators gripped their controls as the FPV feeds shook with turbulence. 3 drones clipped each other midair, colliding in a chain reaction that created 3 brilliant fireballs over the forest canopy. Red icons disappeared from the tactical map. The team had just lost nearly 10% of their strike force. But the missiles were still coming. The operators had no time to mourn. They watched as the 4SA-22s locked onto the surviving drones, closing the distance in seconds. Over the Russian comms channel, the commander's laughter echoed through the static. "They're finished," he said. "They're out of tricks." He was wrong. Back in the Ukrainian van, the lead operator's hand hovered over a final failsafe control. The RAM 2X drones carried a hidden upgrade, a miniaturized ELQ, 50 decoy system, borrowed from U.S. fighter technology. It was a last-resort defense designed for survival. The operator pressed a button. 4 compact pods ejected from the rear of the targeted drones, unfurling thin antennae and emitting powerful false radar and heat signatures, 100 times stronger than the drones themselves. To the incoming missiles, those signals looked irresistible, huge, bright, and easy to hit. The SA-22s instantly corrected course, swerving violently toward the false targets. A second later, the sky erupted in 4 blinding orange fireballs, missiles detonating harmlessly in empty air. Inside the Russian bunker, silence replaced laughter. The veteran commander stared at his screen, speechless. His flawless defense had just been outmaneuvered by machines no bigger than motorcycles. Back in the Ukrainian van, cheers erupted for a brief second, but the operators knew the battle wasn't over. 28 drones remained, and they were entering the most dangerous stretch of their mission. The airspace around the factory was now alive with chaos. Radar sweeps, missile trails, and interference from jamming equipment. Night Owl switched tactics again, recalculating paths to exploit turbulence rather than fight it. Using real-time wind data, it pushed the drones into 3 attack formations. Group 1 heading for the assembly building. Group 2 targeting the component storage facility. Group 3 assigned to the central control center. Each unit adjusted altitude, matching the contours of the terrain. The dense fog that almost doomed them now worked as cover once again. At 3:23 a.m., the drones were within 3 miles of the target. Every Russian gun and missile launcher within range was active, saturating the air with defensive fire. But Night Owl was no longer playing defense. It was orchestrating a final offensive push. Inside the command van, the lead operator's voice came through the radio, calm and precise. 30 seconds to strike zone. All units, maintain lock. The Russians, desperate, fired everything they had left. Dozens of tracer rounds lit the sky, random arcs of fire cutting through the mist. The operators watched their feeds flicker with static as near misses rocked the drone sensors. But the swarm didn't break. By the time the veteran commander realized the drones were closing in, it was too late to stop them. The RAM 2XS were past his last line of defense, less than a minute from impact. The battle in the air was over. The next phase would unfold on the ground. At 3:24 a.m., the Ukrainian operator issued the final order. Weapons free. Begin strike sequence. At 3:24 a.m., the order was given. Inside the Ukrainian command vehicle, the final words echoed over the headsets. Weapons free. Begin strike sequence. In the next instant, 31 remaining RAM 2X drones broke formation and accelerated toward their targets. Night Owl recalculated each flight path with surgical precision, using the 25-mile-per-hour wind shear that had nearly destroyed them minutes earlier as a tailwind. What had once been chaos was now turned into advantage. From the Russian side, the radar screens became a blur of confusion. The overlapping signals from debris, decoys, and turbulence made it nearly impossible to distinguish friend from foe. Operators shouted conflicting reports. Commanders demanded confirmation that never came. Every radar lock flickered and vanished as quickly as it appeared. In that confusion, the Ukrainian swarm pressed forward, flying barely 100 feet above the ground, so low that several drones skimmed over treetops, their sensors mapping every contour of the landscape. At 3:25 a.m., the first drone reached the Veluki Shahid production complex. Its onboard sensors confirmed target lock. The main assembly hall, a reinforced structure lined with steel columns and packed with dozens of partially completed Shahid drones. The Ram 2X released its 15-pound shape-charged warhead directly onto the roof. The explosive punched through 6 inches of steel plating, detonating deep inside the facility. The detonation didn't just tear through the roof. It ignited a cascading pressure wave that raced through the entire assembly line. In seconds, secondary explosions erupted across the complex. Each Ram 2X that followed targeted separate structures, one the component warehouse, another the central control building, and several more the logistics depot where electronic guidance units were stored. The attack was synchronized down to milliseconds. Each warhead's fuse had been programmed with a 0.8-second delay, deliberately designed to trap the blast inside before releasing outward. It was the difference between a grenade detonating in open air and one exploding inside a sealed chamber. The result was catastrophic. A rolling shockwave slammed outward at nearly 30,000 pounds per square inch, shredding everything in a 50-foot radius. Circuit boards disintegrated. Power conduits twisted like wire. Even the structural beams, designed to hold the roof under tons of load, collapsed inward as if crushed by invisible hands. Inside the factory, hundreds of Shahid drones in various stages of construction were instantly reduced to scrap. Some were thrown across the floor by the blast. Others were buried beneath collapsed concrete and steel. Within seconds, what had been Russia's proudest production hub became a furnace of burning metal. The central control center didn't fare any better. Its servers, containing months of production data, blueprints, and logistics schedules, were obliterated in a flash. Monitors melted, hard drives vaporized, and the digital backbone of the plant ceased to exist. At 3:27 a.m., the surviving Ukrainian drones completed their programmed strike runs. With their payload spent, they dove directly into secondary targets, using the remains of their kinetic energy to maximize damage. From orbit, reconnaissance satellites captured the destruction in real time. One operator later described the scene as watching a starfield collapse. By 3:30 a.m., the Russian command network went silent. The veteran commander who had once laughed over the radio now stared at the wreckage reports with disbelief. Every defensive measure had failed. Every layer of protection, radar, missiles, guns, had been bypassed or neutralized. Air raid sirens finally began to wail across Veluki, but they came too late. The strike was complete. A 1,000-foot column of black smoke rose into the early dawn sky, visible for miles. The once secure factory complex was now a smoldering crater. Its roof gone, its walls collapsed, its equipment melted into pools of twisted alloy. Emergency teams and FSB investigators rushed to the scene, but what they found wasn't salvageable. Among the ruins lay the remains of over 200 Shahid drones, 15 of Russia's top engineers, and dozens of production workers. At 4 a.m., a low-orbit satellite confirmed the final damage assessment. A 20-foot deep crater marked the center of the main workshop. Thermal readings indicated secondary fires still burning throughout the compound. The mission had achieved not just success, but total annihilation. Yet the true impact of the operation went far beyond the wreckage. Within hours, encrypted Russian field reports began to pour in from Donetsk and Luhansk sectors. Units that relied on Shahid drones for reconnaissance and strike coordination suddenly found their supply lines cut. Missions were canceled. Surveillance grids went dark. The Russian front, for the first time in months, was flying blind. This was more than a single strike. It was a strategic decapitation. The production pipeline that fueled Russia's drone warfare had been severed. The psychological impact rippled through every level of command. In the Kremlin, confusion reigned. Analysts tried to determine how Ukrainian drones had traveled hundreds of miles undetected through layers of supposedly impenetrable defenses. Security briefings turned into shouting matches. One commander was reportedly heard demanding, "How do they keep getting here?" While Moscow scrambled for answers, Ukraine seized the moment. Within the following 72 hours, Ukrainian forces launched 5 coordinated offensives across the Kharkiv sector, capitalizing on the paralysis of Russian air support. The timing was precise, executed while the enemy's surveillance network lay in ruins. By the time Russia restored partial drone operations weeks later, the front lines had shifted. The loss of the Velyky plant was no longer just a tactical failure. It was a blow to national morale, a public embarrassment for a regime that had promise invulnerability. Back in Kiev, the mission's success was quietly logged under a code name that would never appear in public records. For the Ukrainian drone corps, it was proof of what they had long believed. Victory in modern warfare doesn't depend on who has the biggest army, but on who can outthink the enemy. The Velyky raid would go down as one of the most daring and technically complex operations of the conflict, a moment when precision, intelligence, and audacity converge into a single, devastating strike. By sunrise, as the smoke drifted eastward and the last embers of the destroyed factory faded into the mist, one truth had become undeniable. The age of mass firepower had been replaced by the age of algorithm and ingenuity. Ukraine had not just struck deep into enemy territory. They had rewritten the very rules of warfare.